Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle and this is a reading roundup. These are going to be the books that I read in July that were not connected to Jane Austen July, which I participated in and enjoyed very much. And I did post videos, weekly videos for that if you want to check them out. So the books that I read that weren't connected to that in July, plus the books that I've read the first week of August. And so there's a few more books here than I generally do in a reading roundup. But yeah, I kind of just have this collection that I've been saving up. I'm going to start with books, the ebooks that I've read. A number of these are advanced reader copies that I received, or ebooks that I read from the library. So I've got my cup of coffee and let's chat about books. The first book that I read was an advanced reader copy that I got from NetGalley, and it was called Lady Anne and the Menacing Mystic by Victoria Hamilton. I'm going to put the picture in here. This is the fourth in her Lady Anne Addison series, and I have not read any of this series nor any by this author. It's a historical mystery set in Bath in the Georgian time period, which is what attracted me to this book. I love historical mysteries, and the Georgian time period is very interesting to me, and the setting of Bath also intrigued me. But I have to say, this was just not the book for me. Basically, the story is that Arthur Lonsdale is found dead, poisoned by yew, like from the yew tree, not poisoned by you. Okay, so anyway, I ended up giving this one 2 stars, and the reason for that is it's a historical mystery, but I never actually really felt like I was in Georgian England. So the author, she did do a good job of describing the fashions, the clothes that people were wearing, but I kept getting pulled out of that world by modern day sensibilities. There was just too much, and especially her main character, Lady Anne, was too, the way she treated people and the way she spoke to people was too modern, and so it didn't feel like I was in Georgian Bath. Plus, there was far too much setup for me. It took too long for anything to happen, and it was like more than halfway through the book before the murder happened, and I know that that's not uncommon, but it's not my preference. So I gave that one 2 stars. And then I read another advanced reader copy from NetGalley called I Saw Him Die by Andrew Wilson, and I'll put the picture in. This is, oh, and sorry, the Lady Anne, all of these that are advanced reader copies are now out if you are interested in checking them out for yourself. So I Saw Him Die is another in Andrew Wilson's Agatha Christie series. I believe it's the 4th one. And this one is set in Scotland on the island of Skye. I've been really enjoying Andrew Wilson's series. Agatha Christie is the main character, and they're just really fun. And so they're set in the 20s. Yes, they're set in the 20s because the first book in the series addresses what happened when Agatha Christie went missing, so 1926. So this one is probably 28, 29, possibly 30. Anyway, so Agatha Christie and John Davison, who works for the Security Intelligence Services, SIS, and Agatha Christie has done a little bit of work for them. They go to Dalek Lodge on the island of Skye because Robin Kinmuir, who is the owner of the house, is an ex-officer in the SIS, and he has received death threats, and so John Davison goes with Agatha Christie to investigate. So what's great here is it's a country house mystery, and it's a closed circle mystery, which I love. Even John Davison says near the beginning when they arrive at the house, Dalek Lodge, he says, it looks the perfect place for a murder. So it's great. There are 9 guests staying at the house and about 4 or 5 servants. So it's a nice closed circle mystery. It also has that great trope of gathering everybody for a will reading, which I always enjoy. So the man that they're there to protect, Robin Kinmuir, gets shot on the moors, presumably by accident, when his son is grouse hunting. So they come back to the house and the son just admits it flat out. I shot him, I killed him, it was an accident. The author uses, I think very cleverly, as a kind of nod to Agatha Christie, throwback to her books, he uses a nursery rhyme called Who Killed Cock Robin. So I Saw Him Die is from that nursery rhyme, and it plays a big part in the plot. So, but despite the Christie connection, it's not a fair play puzzle mystery, which is okay. I really like fair play puzzle mysteries, and this one's not, because the reader does not have access to all the clues and information that the detectives do. And that's what makes a fair play puzzle mystery, is if the reader has all of the clues and information that the detective does and has a fair chance of guessing the solution before it's revealed by the detective. There were titles for Christie's books in the story, like it came out in descriptions or through things that people said. So Dumb Witness, Death Comes as the End, which is, I just think it's fun. Like if you're gonna have a book about Agatha Christie, to just kind of throw some of this stuff in there for her fans who will pick up on it. I really like that. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. It was a really fun country house closed circle mystery. And then from Book Sirens, I received an advanced reader copy of a book called Perpetual Check by F. Nelson Smith. And one thing that I loved, it's a mystery set in the 80s, which automatically caught my attention. I thought that was very interesting. But the author lives in Red Deer, Alberta, which is very close to where I grew up. And I have family that live in Red Deer, so I just thought that was a fun little connection. So, 1985, Dani and her aunt Lucy are on holiday in England, and they get caught up in Cold War shenanigans. It was really fun. You know, there was clues in a postcard, and there was microfiche, and so they plan to go on this bus tour of England, and they meet a woman who is also going to be on the tour, and in the hotel before the bus tour even starts. So in the hotel in London, this woman that they meet is found dead right outside their hotel room door. She's been stabbed in the back. And so the two of them get involved because this woman, before she dies, she's not quite dead yet when they find her, and she says something to the aunt, and it gets these two kind of involved in the plot. It was really fun. I enjoyed the fact that it was set in the 80s, and Dani and her aunt were fun characters. I loved the bus tour element. It had a bit of a closed circle feel to it. It wasn't really, but it had that feel because everybody on the bus tour was a suspect, and I gave that one 4 stars as well. And then back to NetGalley, another arc I read was The Child Across the Street by Kerry Wilkinson. This is a standalone, and I've read a lot of Kerry Wilkinson's books and really enjoyed them. He has a series of Detective Daniels, I think. I really enjoy those. This is a standalone, and again, this one was quite good. I gave it 4 stars. Abigail Coyle has gone back home for her father's funeral, and she has not been back to her hometown for 20 years. This is the first time that she's been back. This was told in first person present tense, which was great because it was very immersive, and we find out what's happening along with Abby. So she gets off the bus on the street where she lives and is walking to her house when she doesn't witness the hit and run, but she's close enough that she can remember a bit of the car as it drives away, and she finds the boy who was knocked off his bicycle. And so there's great themes in this story of secrets, hometown loyalty, home, dysfunctional relationships, and there's a great quote between 2 of the characters, and one of them says, "Do you ever wonder if we are who we are because of our parents?" So I enjoyed that one as well. I gave that one 4 stars. And then I've read The Blitz Detective by Mike Hollow, and I talked about this one in my Fiction in Real Life video, The Blitz, if you want to see that. So I'm not going to say a huge amount about this one either, but this is a historical mystery set in London in 1940, and it was really fun. I really enjoyed the added conflict of trying to investigate a murder during the Blitz. And so you have Inspector Jago, I think you say his name, Jago. It's a name from Cornwall, and his Sergeant Craddock. They are called to the scene. A body has been found in a van, and they are there long enough to kind of look at the body, find the cause of death, find his wallet to get his identification. But then a bombing raid starts, and they have to go hide. They don't want to go to a shelter because they don't want to leave the crime scene, but then the van gets blown up, and so the body and the van are just, it's all gone. And so that added conflict and confusion were a great element of the story. The inspector, Yago, I really don't know how to say that name. He was a really interesting character. He fought in World War I, and so his reactions to being in London during the Blitz, it brought up a lot of stuff from his experiences in the First World War. I love that there was this inclusion that he read Jane Austen when he was in the trenches. I just really like that. So yeah, it had good pacing, interesting characters, plenty of suspects with themes of justice, truth, duty, and loyalty. And I gave that one 4 stars, and I would totally look for more in that series. And then I read The Fate of the Flapper by Susanna Calkins. This is another advanced reader copy just out. It's the second in a series during Prohibition era Chicago that I really like. So I talked about the first one in a previous reading roundup video, and so it's 1929 Chicago. Prohibition is still in full effect. It's that flapper culture. It's so great, but it's also set during September and October, so right around the time of the collapse of the stock market, which was part of the story. Very interesting. So Gina Ricci is a cigarette girl at a speakeasy, and customers are being poisoned by a bad batch of kind of moonshine, I guess, or is something else going on? Her cousin, Nancy Doyle, who is a police officer who really wants to advance and become a detective and become more respected by her colleagues, she calls Gina early one morning to come to the scene of a death and take photos of the crime scene. She's trying to get like a jump on the investigation. So again, this was another really good one. I really like Susanna Calkins. She's a good writer, and this is a really fun series, and I gave it 4 stars. And another advanced reader copy, I've read a lot recently of these advanced reader copies, but The Cabinets of Barnaby, Mayne by Elsa Hart was great. It's another historical mystery. This one is set in 1703 in London, so a great time period that I really love, but I haven't actually read a huge amount from. Sir Barnaby Mayne is found dead in his study during a tour of his collections. So it's kind of a closed circle mystery because it takes place in his house and there's a group of people there who have come to tour his collections. Sir Barnaby Mayne is famous for his cabinets of curiosities. His whole house is taken up with his collections, and he actually bought the house next door and connected them in order to expand his collections and have space to show and display all of his things. And so he has, I mean, he's got everything. He's got you know, fossils and skeletons of animals and fish and plants and but then he also has like curiosities from other countries. And so at this time, this was kind of a really popular burgeoning thing for people to have collections and to show off their collections. It was a time of scientific discovery and interest. And I really loved this aspect of the story. For this to be a key part of the story, I found it different and interesting. The understanding of science and religion at the time period I thought was really interesting, and people's fascination with the unknown, the unusual, the exotic. All of that means that there were fascinating characters, great conflict and motives because of the jealousies between collectors and scientists. The main character is Lady Cecily K, and she's at the house. She's staying there for a week or so because she wants to identify and categorize some plants that she's brought back from Smyrna. She's been living in Smyrna with her husband, who is a diplomat of some sort. This was a great story. I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. And then I read an ebook from the library through my Libby app called Murder at the Mena House by Erica Ruth Neubauer. I read this because it was a recommendation from one of my great subscribers, so thank you very much for recommending this to me. It was a historical mystery set in Egypt in 1926, so great time period, great setting. Egypt in the 1920s is fascinating. So Anna Stainton is found shot dead in her room, and the prime suspect seems to be Jane, who's the main character of the book. And then another hotel guest gets murdered. So it was good. Jane felt like she needed to investigate because she was a prime suspect by the police. So interesting characters, great sense of time and place. I thought that was really well done, and I gave it 3 stars. And then I read another advanced reader copy from NetGalley called The Lions of Fifth Avenue by Fiona Davis. I've read The Chelsea Girls, and I really liked that one. That one was set in the 50s. This one is set in New York City in 1913, and what drew my attention to this was the fact that it was set in the New York City Public Library, and it was about books that had been stolen from collections in the library, and that really piqued my interest. So this was told in third person, and it has dual timelines, so New York City 1913 and then New York City 1993. In the 1913 timeline, the main character is Laura Lyons. She lives with her family in a private apartment in the library. What? That is awesome. And apparently that was true. So when the library was first opened, there was an apartment there for the superintendent. Her husband is the superintendent in the library. The director of the library is his boss. And so I got the impression that he was in charge of everything that was like not connected to the books or the librarians, because they gave this list of staff that he was in charge of, and they included attendants, porters, elevator runners, steam fitters, stack runners, and coal passers. So first of all, how awesome would it be to live in the New York City Public Library? I mean, right? Awesome. So then the second timeline is New York City 1993. Sadie Donovan is an assistant curator for one of the collections in the library, and when the curator unexpectedly quits, she is promoted into that position. In both timelines, there are thefts of books from the library, which I found really interesting. But in the end, I have to say, I wanted to like this book more than I did. And I'm not entirely sure what it is. I loved the premise, the parts about the library, the rare book collections, how thefts are dealt with. Those parts were great. And so, but I just felt like there was something missing that was just slightly unsatisfying, and I'm not entirely sure why, if it was the characters, I don't know. I liked the 1993 timeline a bit better than the 1913 timeline. So in the end, I gave The Lions of Fifth Avenue 3 stars. And then I read, this is the last of the advanced reader copies. I read Auntie Poldi and the Handsome Antonio by Mario Giordano. This is a book that was translated into the English this year, which is why it's just come out. And it was translated by John Brownjohn, but I believe that it came out in German in 2018, I think. So it was translated from the German by John Brownjohn. This is a series. I've only read 2 books in the series. Auntie Poldi and the Handsome Antonio is the 3rd in the series, I believe. It could be the 4th, but I think it's the 3rd. And so what I did was I went and got the first one from the library. And I'm glad that I did, because the first one kind of really sets up the character and the structure and style of this series, which I have to say I love and I am totally on board with. So the first in the series is Auntie Poldi and the Sicilian Lions. Auntie Poldi is 60 years old and she retires to Sicily. And she just wants to drink and wait for death, essentially. But Auntie Poldi is a great character. She's larger than life. And I like stories that are told in a different way. And this one totally counts, because Poldi's nephew is the narrator of these stories. He is never named. We don't know his name. But he is recounting the story as he heard it from her. So it's first person. The nephew, it's first person, so he says I, but he's telling the story of Auntie Poldi. So it's this like bizarre, like he's the narrator, but the main character is Auntie Poldi. But I really like that aspect of it. And so in this particular book, she discovers the dead body of Valentino, who is a young man who's been doing some work on the house that she bought in Sicily. And so she gets herself involved in the investigation. And I made some, I got some tabs here to just kind of show the style of this narration, which is so great. That was when I made Valentino a promise, she told me later. An almost automatic process was at work. That's why. It was genetically conditioned. So there you get this, that impression that she tells him the story later, and then he has written it. And then again, so what I love is that he tells the story, but there's periodic breaks where you get the conversation between him and his aunt as she's telling him the story. You chatted him up, I exclaimed when she told me about it later. You find a dead body and flirt with the chief investigator? You're simply shameless? No, totally cool. So I love that. Those little interspersions give you a great idea of the relationship between Auntie Poldi and her nephew. And then a little bit later, he said, although I can only report what my aunt told me, of course, I feel sure her emotions were ablaze. So that there is a reminder that he is a biased narrator, because he loves his aunt and he is telling the story as she told it to him. So it's coming from his particular bias, which I'm totally fine with. Or here's another example. Perhaps he was just, well, shy, I hazarded when she told me about it on my next visit in September. So I really like that style of telling the story. And so this one, I gave 4 stars to this one, and I'm counting it for my Around the World challenge for Sicily. There's great descriptions of Sicily, and especially of food in these books. And so if you like that, then you'll probably really enjoy this book. And if you enjoy books that are told in a slightly different way, then you might really enjoy this as well. So Auntie Poldi and the Handsome Antonio is, I believe, the 3rd in the series, and I think is even crazier than the first book, because the only way I can really describe it is to call it a madcap adventure. It was so fun, and I loved that in this book, the nephew, who is ordinarily just the chronicler, plays a more active role in the events of the story. And so there are huge pieces of it where he is just telling the story as told to him by his auntie, but there are pieces where he is directly involved in the action, and I really liked that. You never know what is going to happen next, except that it is going to be bizarre and somehow believable. There's a quote, and it's said multiple times throughout the story, which I just totally love, is Sicily is complicated and something always intervenes, which is so good. So in this story, her estranged husband shows up on the doorstep looking for his brother. And so Auntie Poldi gets involved trying to help him find his brother. And so I was trying to figure out how to explain the point of view in this story, or the narrator in this story. So it is first person from the nephew's point of view, but again, like I said, Auntie Poldi is the main character. So what I came up with was to say that it's an unreliable, reliable narrator. In other words, the narrator is reliable but biased. He is omniscient but limited, because he can only tell what his aunt told him. And then the other thing that I love in this book is that the author literally names the literary device that he's using, which I think is hilarious, and he did it in the first one too. So in the first book, the Auntie Poldi and the Sicilian lions, there's a part where she grabs a gun, and it's from her deceased husband's collection, and she says they're all like decommissioned. but she grabs a gun for protection or safety or something, and they flat out say about, is it Chekhov's gun, that principle where if a gun shows up in the first act, it had better go off by the third act, and they literally talk about that in the story when she grabs a gun, and I just think that that is awesome. Auntie Poldi and the handsome Antionio, it's a MacGuffin, and so the fact that the brother is missing is the MacGuffin, and they actually say that it's a MacGuffin, and so I just really enjoy that. It's a crazy series. It's larger than life. Madcap adventure is the best way to describe it. Okay, let's get to some physical books that I read. We're almost done, I promise. The Passenger by Lisa Lutz. I read this and I gave it, sorry, I'm looking at my book here, my notebook where I write everything down. I gave this one 4 stars. This came out in 2015, and I want to be really careful what I say about this book because I don't want to give any spoilers at all. It was very entertaining, but it's very easy to spoil what happens. So all I'm going to do is read the first paragraph because I think that tells you what you need to know. When I found my husband at the bottom of the stairs, I tried to resuscitate him before I ever considered disposing of the body. I pumped his barrel chest and blew into his purple lips. It was the first time in years that our lips had touched, and I didn't recoil. I gave up after 10 minutes. Frank Dubois was gone. Lying there all peaceful and quiet, he almost looked in slumber, but Frank was noisier asleep than he was awake. Honestly, if I had known what kind of snorer he was going to turn into, I never would have married him. If I could do it all over again, I never would have married him, even if he slept like an angel. If I could do it all over again, there are so many things I would do differently. But looking at Frank then, so still and not talking, I didn't mind him so much. It seemed like a good time to say goodbye. I poured a shot of Frank's special bourbon, sat down on Frank's faux suede lazy boy, and had a drink to honor the dead. In case you were wondering, I didn't do it. I didn't have anything to do with Frank's death. I don't have an alibi, so you'll have to take my word for it. I was taking a shower when Frank died. As far as I could tell, he fell down the staircase all on his own. He had been suffering from vertigo lately. Convenient, I know. And I doubt he mentioned it to anyone. If I had waited for the police and told them the truth, maybe life could have continued as normal, minus Frank. So this was a really fun read. You never know what's about to happen, and you are really curious to find out what is going on in this book. I gave it 4 stars. And then I finally finished The Lord of the Rings. This has been a long time happening, but I read The Return of the King, and I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was a great ending to the story. I don't read fantasy, but I love The Lord of the Rings. I love J.R.R. Tolkien, and I think it's because it is a grand, epic quest. That's what I love about it. The fantasy part I can give or take, but it is a grand, epic quest with eternal themes, and that's why I love this story so much. One thing that I really noticed highlighted in all 3 of the books, but especially in this one, is how long everything takes and how far apart everything actually is. And so in the second book, when Sam and Frodo actually enter Mordor for the first time, I mean, they've been close and whatever, but they're actually in Mordor, and they can see Mount Doom, but it is actually still 40 miles away. And so I just think, like, the grand themes in this of good versus evil, and power and what power does to people, and loyalty and mercy and hope and friendship. it's just a great story, and I just really loved it, and I'm so glad that I've finished reading this trilogy again. And then the last book, you must be so excited, this has gone on for a while, is The Flimflam Affair by Bill Pronzini. This is in the Quincannon and Carpenter series. This is a series that he initially was writing with his wife, but the past couple he's just been writing on his own. These are historical mysteries set in San Francisco in the very late 1800s, so like 1895, 96. In this book, I believe it's 1899. So this is a quick read. Carpenter and Quincannon are a pair of private investigators, and in this book, there's 3 cases that are solved in this book, and it's called The Flimflam Affair, although that's the second case. And so I thought that was interesting. I don't know why they chose to title it based only on the second case, but so it's a fun read. It's a fun historical mystery. I really like the time period and the setting, and I gave it 3 stars. So that was a lot of books. Have you read any of those books? I would love to chat about them in the comment section down below. Do any of those books sound interesting to you? I would love to hear about that as well. And I will see you for another video soon. Bye.